The air in the school was stale, a mixture of old textbooks, floor polish, and unspoken anxieties. SMA Nagari 3 was an aging concrete structure. Its corridors echoed with the footsteps of generations past. But it was the whispers in the upper corridor that peeked through the keyhole of room 308 that truly captured the imagination of its students. Some said she was murdered, others that she died in a terrible accident, but all agreed her spirit remained trapped and weeping in the toilet on the third floor. The legend of the girl in the upper toilet wasn't new. It was a persistent rumor, woven into the fabric of the school's folklore, passed down in hushed tones during lunch breaks and after-school clubs. Most students avoided the third-floor toilets, especially when the afternoon shadows grew long and the building emptied. Or maybe, just maybe, she craved a good scare. But Maya, a bookish girl with a thirst for the unknown, felt a different pull. She found the story of the girl trapped in the toilet both fascinating and tragic. One day, Maya decided to investigate. Maybe the story was true. Maybe the girl needed her help. Maya walked further in. Her footsteps echoed slightly on the tiled floor. "Hello," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The days following her visit to the third-floor toilet were different, subtly at first, then undeniably. Sleep became a battlefield. Vivid nightmares, disturbingly realistic, plagued her nights. It was a deep, bone-tired fatigue that no amount of rest seemed to alleviate. Her focus at school wavered, thoughts drifted, replaced by a strange, blank emptiness. And then there was the cold, not just feeling chilly, but sudden, intense drops in temperature that seemed localized to her. A cold spot on her arm when she was in a warm classroom, an icy breath against her neck when she was alone in her room. They weren't always about the school or a girl in a toilet. Sometimes they were disjointed, surreal, filled with cold spaces and a suffocating sense of dread. She'd wake up exhausted, the lingering tendrils of fear clinging to her. During the day, a pervasive weariness settled over her. The feeling of being watched intensified. She would turn around abruptly, convinced someone was behind her, only to find empty space. The faint whispers from the toilet seemed to follow her home. Sometimes they were just out of her hearing, like static on a radio. The whispers from the toilet, though, were now more distinct in her mind. Even when she wasn't there, they were luring, subtly calling her back. They promised understanding. They revealed secrets. They whispered her name with a chilling familiarity. It was a siren song of the supernatural, and even as the strange symptoms scared her, a part of her, the part that craved answers, felt compelled to listen. The entity, whatever it was, had made contact, and it was slowly, insidiously, beginning to consume her. The truth was far more horrifying than a simple murder. When it finally began to surface, Maya's relentless digging, connecting fragmented records and obscure historical notes, led her down a path she could never have anticipated. City's death wasn't an accident. It was a ritual sacrifice, one that had been carefully planned and carried out within the school's confines. The horrifying implication crashed down on her. Her family's lineage was tied to this place, this ritual, this entity. The curse wasn't just something that affected the school. It was a family curse, passed down through the bloodline, ensuring that a descendant would always be available to serve the entity or become the next offering. And the most chilling revelation, the connection wasn't just to the school's history, but to her own. Through cross-referencing land deeds, family trees, and old community records, Maya found irrefutable evidence that her ancestors, generations back, were deeply involved with the founding of the school and the occult practices that seemingly took place there. They were not just passive residents. They were key players, perhaps even the orchestrators or guardians of the dark power that now resided in the toilet. An internal battle raged, relentless and terrifying. Maya felt like a house being systematically dismantled from the inside. Memories flickered, sometimes replaced by images and sensations that weren't hers. The realization dawned on her with bone-chilling clarity. The act of communication itself hadn't merely alerted the entity. It was the mechanism through which it gained entry. It was a parasitic link established the moment she opened the door and offered a channel. It wasn't a sad ghost seeking peace. It was a predatory force using the legend as a lure, seeking a suitable host. And because of her heritage, she was not just suitable, she was ideal. The dampness of cold stone, the scent of metallic tamps in old dust, a profound, ancient sorrow, and the sharp, brief agony of an unknown pain. She'd catch herself thinking thoughts that felt alien, reacting to situations with emotions that didn't belong to her own personality. Her quiet habits, her individual quirks, were being smoothed over, overwritten by the invasive presence. It was a constant, exhausting struggle for control. She clung desperately to her own identity, repeating her name, recalling specific personal memories, trying to anchor herself against the tide of the entity's influence. Sleep offered no respite. The dreams were now a battleground where the entity fought for dominance, whispering lies, twisting her perceptions, trying to convince her to surrender. With her own mind becoming a contested territory, Maya's understanding of the situation deepened, shedding the last vestiges of supernatural romance. The toilet wasn't just haunted by a girl's ghost. It was a nexus of dark energy. The ritual performed there, centuries ago, hadn't just claimed a life. It had anchored a power, a malevolent force, that required periodic sustenance. City was likely the first victim, her death and the location consecrating the spot. The entity wasn't City's soul, but the power itself, perhaps feeding on the residual energy of the sacrifice, or maybe something far older, summoned and bound by the ritual. The legend of the girl was merely a convenient cover, a narrative to draw in the curious, the sympathetic, the vulnerable. The location, the specific dimensions of the space, perhaps even the materials used in the construction of that part of the school were chosen or manipulated to serve as a focal point, a conduit for this dark force. Her family's role became terrifyingly clear. They weren't just involved, they were custodians of this horror, perhaps bound by an ancient pact or seeking power through the entity. The curse wasn't arbitrary misfortune. It was a mechanism to ensure the continuation of the lineage tied to the ritual site, guaranteeing a supply of suitable vessels or offerings. The generational involvement meant the entity was intimately familiar with their bloodline, recognizing Maya as a descendant and, therefore, a potential successor to either the role of guardian or the fate of the sacrificed. The truth was colder, more calculated, and infinitely more terrifying than a simple haunting. The weight of her family's history was a crushing burden. How could her ancestors be involved with something so monstrous? Were there any living relatives who knew, who were complicit? Maya needed answers. Hidden beneath musty linens and faded photographs, she found a secret compartment. Inside, brittle, yellowed letters and a leather-bound journal, written in elegant spidery script, spanned generations. There was a detached, horrifying acceptance of the necessity of the sacrifices. Her grandmother's old storage chest in the attic, long forgotten, held the key. It was now inside her, bound by blood and the link she had forged. She wasn't just connected to the focal point. She was becoming the focal point. The legacy wasn't a secret kept by the living. It was a historical pact etched in blood and darkness, now resurrected through her accidental contact. But as she read on, the veil of euphemism lifted, revealing the chilling truth. Detailed descriptions of rituals, the necessity of the offering, the binding pact with the entity, and the explicit instruction to guide descendants towards the focal point when the time was right. The journal entries were cryptic at first, speaking of duties and sacred geometry in maintaining the balance. The letters spoke of family members discussing the stability of the arrangement, and their anxieties about descendants who strayed or became unsuitable. There was no living family member she could confront. Her closest relatives were either unaware or long gone. Escaping the school, leaving the town, it all felt futile. The entity wasn't confined to the toilet. The pressure to go to the toilet became almost unbearable. It wasn't just a desire. It felt like a physical compulsion, a magnetic pull emanating from the third floor of the school. The entity within her was orchestrating it, merging its will with her own dwindling autonomy. She found herself drifting towards the stairs during breaks, her feet leading her in that direction before her conscious mind could intervene. Dreams showed her the toilet, bathed in an unnatural, pulsating darkness, beckoning her. Her physical and mental state deteriorated rapidly. The lines between her thoughts and the entities blurred completely at times. She would lose minutes, sometimes hours, snapping back to awareness with no memory of what she had done or where she had been, often finding herself closer to the dreaded third floor. Her reflection was no longer fully her own. The eyes held an alien depth. The smile was sometimes too wide, too knowing. She was being prepared, groomed for the final step. The journal spoke of the ritual's completion requiring the offering to return willingly or to be guided to the focal point when the energy peaked. She was being drawn back, her body, mind, and spirit being primed to fulfill the ancient pact. The entity had consumed enough of her identity to steer her, using the lingering fragments of her curiosity and fear to manipulate her into returning. The school, the toilet, the entity and her family's legacy were converging, and she was at the terrifying center of it all. The next intended sacrifice in a cycle that had spanned centuries. The time for the ritual was drawing near. The pool was strongest at night when the school was silent and shrouded in darkness. Maya found herself standing outside the toilet door, not entirely sure how she got there. The air pulsed with a tangible, cold energy. The metallic temps was overpowering. Inside, the flickering lights seemed to intensify, casting frantic shadows that danced like macabre figures. This was it, the focal point. The altar of her family's dark legacy. The entity inside her surged, ready to complete the consumption, to merge fully, to perhaps perform the final act of the ritual through her. But reading the journal had given her a sliver of understanding, perhaps even a sliver of hope. The entity was bound to the focal point. It needed the ritual, the specific location, the bloodline. The journal hinted at ways the cycle could be disrupted, not by destroying the entity itself, but by breaking its connection to the point, or by denying it the complete offering.